Okay, so are we ready to start? Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining us today in this webinar with Professor Rene Domingo. My name is Car Testa, and I am the interim head of the School of Executive Education of the Asian Institute of Management. With us today, we have Professor Domingo, or Prof. Rene, as we fondly call him. He is an associate professor of AIM, and he has been with AIM for many, many years. He has helped many students learn a lot about operations management, among other things. He specializes in and has research interests in various things, no? Especially like total quality management, lean management, service operations, and healthcare management. He also has a research interest in turnaround management. And I'm sure since we are all experiencing this pandemic, which is pretty much hitting a lot of businesses negatively, we would all like to learn more about how we can do something that really makes a difference and will help us turn around our businesses. No? Now, he is not only a teacher and professor, but he is also a consultant to major local and Asian firms, including banks and hospitals. No? So without much ado, good morning, everyone. Welcome again. And now I will turn over the floor to Professor Rene. Thank you. Rene?
Thank you, Car. Let me just share my screen. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Car, for that introduction. So today I'm going to talk about how to pivot to serve the pandemic and post-pandemic markets. I hope that, as Carl mentioned, we'll find some ways on how to cope with this ongoing crisis. I'll try to share as much as I can from my experience and my research. Before that, let me just show this slide. This was my first title of the webinar, but I'd like to show it again because this has a certain message, and we're gonna talk about business continuity. How do you ensure that you still have businesses and jobs in the new normal? Okay, how do we change our strategy? We call it pivoting. This is a different kind of survival strategy, which I will discuss in this webinar. Okay, my career, consulting, teaching, as well as writing career, have revolved around survival strategies. My first book talked about, it was entitled Quality Means Survival. In this book, I talk about how to deal with the Japanese competition. You know, made in Japan, good quality. When Japan went global, it was able to conquer a lot of industries worldwide. So all countries were in crisis. They were taking over a lot of industries and businesses because of good quality. And I wrote several ideas on how to deal with this threat. Okay, my second book has to do with the Asian financial crisis and how companies, particularly in Indonesia, were able to cope with this financial crisis and turn around their companies and able to survive and thrive. Okay, so as you can see, my third book will be about the pandemic, but that will be years later. So instead of waiting for that publication, I decided to share a lot of my ideas in social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, and of course through webinars like this. Okay, some expectation. What do we expect to get from this short webinar? Okay, I like to start off with certain basics of management. Okay, I suppose that I cannot give all the answers to your questions, but the takeaway I'd like us to have will be knowing how to ask the right questions. This is more important than getting the answers. You know, in management, the first thing you do is ask the right questions and then find the answers or get somebody who knows the answers. We'll focus more on asking the right questions. After this webinar, hopefully, you can have strat meetings with your management team and ask the right questions. So don't start looking for answers if you don't have the right questions. And I will share with you some framework so that you can ask these questions to help you survive. So the translation of this basic concept would be search the right question before you search for the right answer. A well-defined problem is half solved. I'm sure you've heard of that. And conversely, an ill-defined problem will never be solved. Okay. Don't throw money at the wrong problem. Okay. This is throwing good money after bad. And so let me start off with defining this crisis before we go to the pivot strategy. This health crisis is not actually just a health crisis. It's a 3-in-1 crisis. Okay? Most of you know it's already a public health crisis. It's an economic crisis that became an economic crisis, but increasingly it's becoming a social crisis. Now, social crisis, this has the biggest impact on businesses because when society changes its behavior, marketing behavior also changes. So this will challenge all our business assumptions about what the customer wants, and this is what I'm going to talk about when I talk about coping this kind of crisis. So in a nutshell, the health crisis is giving us problem, but it's going to be short term till we find a vaccine, probably in 18 months or less. And of course, the risk is death, infection. The economic crisis is parallel and it lasts probably longer than the pandemic. Will give us medium-term disruption in business. And the typical solution as we see right now is financial turnaround, assistance, dole out subsidies, tax cuts, interest cuts. This will just solve the economic crisis. The bigger crisis to me is the social crisis because it's going to be long, indefinite. It will cause business closure because businesses will become irrelevant once the market expectation changes. So the option is not throwing money at the problem. Either you get out of that business, divest, or you pivot. You change business in a very strategic way, which I will discuss. Okay. Okay, just to summarize, if you put it in business terms, the two crises, the health and economic, will stop the buying temporarily. No sales, no revenue. But you know, we can wait for this. Okay, we can prepare for the reopening of the economy. But there's a problem. When the economy reopens, it's not going to be the same old economy. There'll be what we call the new normal. This is where the social crisis comes in. Will you still be relevant? Because the social crisis will change buying behavior. And for many businesses, and I will name this later on, it will stop the buying permanently. So it's pointless to wait for the reopening of the economy when the customers are not around. Okay. So in a nutshell, what's worse than running out of cash is running out of customers. This is fatal to many business. If you have a cash problem, that's difficult, but that can be solved. You can borrow, you can recover cash. But when your customers flee, or find your product irrelevant, unnecessary, then there's no hope. There's no hope. The government cannot assist you. Nobody can assist you. And then jobs will be lost. Businesses will be lost. So this is what I'm going to talk about today. For cash problem, there are many webinars on this, how to fix this problem. But this one is a little bit you know, I've seen very few coping mechanism when it comes to the social part of this crisis. So let me start off with listing down not industries but businesses which are vulnerable to in this crisis. We'll have the first set of vulnerability. These are the companies which are financially or economically challenged. I guess you know most of this already. Okay? One is if you're dependent on a few products, few customers, or few markets, then you're vulnerable. Because if any of this product, any of these customers, any of this market are shut down or they have problem, then your business is down. Right? You don't have a top line, especially if 80% of your sales are you know are accounted for by just a handful of products, customers, or markets. Okay? The second vulnerable type of business are those with very few supply chain partners. Like, for example, you're so dependent on China, then China stopped, then that's it. You're very vulnerable. Or your source of material just come from one area. There's no second source. There's no plan B. Okay. The third one is highly leveraged. You have a lot of debts, right? So this can be a problem because once your business is down, you still have to pay your loans. You have to pay the bonds. Right? So this is very high risk position. Of course, the second one is you have high fixed costs, which means you have high break-even capacity or sales. Well, with social distancing, you're only allowed certain capacity. So these companies will be in trouble. Okay. The third one, of course, if you have high credit sales, you have high accounts receivables, they're gonna be unpaid because people don't have cash. So this is very vulnerable. Now banks, if you're a bank, you're prepared for this. Like they do provisioning for bad loans. But for non-banks, this is going to be a big problem because a lot of their sales would be in receivable, then they cannot liquidate that. Combine that with high fixed costs because your fixed costs are running while you are not collecting. This is going to be a big financial squeeze on most companies who are not prepared for this scenario. And the last vulnerable one type is the labor intensive. It's very hard to downsize or right size if you're big manpower. It's very hard to reskill them. It's not impossible, but it's going to be expensive or difficult compared to companies that are more machine oriented. You know, you can downsize machine capacity, okay, or process capacity. Okay, so I'm not gonna discuss how to deal with these types of business or vulnerable with these issues. Okay, because these are just financially challenged companies. Okay, so let's talk about the second type of vulnerability, which is the focus of this webinar. Where will it come from? It will come from, oh, by the way, I'm sorry. I just made this post in Facebook, I think, and LinkedIn. So just a quick to help you cope with that vulnerability if you have the type 1 is check your vital signs to C+2S. Make sure you have enough cash during the lockdown. Make sure you have enough liquidity to restart your business when the economy reopens. Assure your customers that you're still around. You can still serve them during the lockdown or after the lockdown. Show them that you're still in the game. You don't downsize right away. Okay. Make sure you have enough staff to reopen the business. You need them. You protect them like your family members. And make sure your suppliers, your key suppliers are still running, because you cannot start without suppliers, even if you have staff or customers. So your key suppliers must be assured. You have to be with these three stakeholders when you reopen: customers, staff, and suppliers. Okay. So let's talk about the second type of vulnerability. So what makes this crisis very different compared to the Asian financial crisis or the global financial crisis, in which when the economy reopens, you're back to where you started. The economy, can be jump started. You're back with the same customers. same market. In other words, you're back to the old normal. But in this case, we're not gonna go back to the old normal. We're going back to the new normal. And new normal means new markets, new behavior. And this is the specific of the new normal. They will have new expectation. This will be subject to research, but offhand, I can name some. One is the post-pandemic society in the long term or maybe permanently will be more health conscious, more safety conscious. They will put a premium on convenience. We're not just talking about customer experience. Convenience is related to safety because they don't want to take so much time outside. They don't want to meet a lot of people. So they want to have the same things faster. And of course, frugality. They're very worried about their economic position. Most of them will be, a lot of people will be jobless. They're not sure of their employment status. So everybody will hold on to their cash. So a lot of frugality, frugal behavior will be seen in the next few years. So translation, how do you translate this to concrete behavior, which will need some businesses to pivot? One is they would expect less contact, less interaction with whatever, people, products, process, logistics. They would want things to be traceable, whether it's product or process. They will be asking where did it come from, who touched these things. Next is they will minimize, not really avoid, minimize travel and movement if they could. Okay. This may continue, stay where you are, do everything where you are, stay at home, work from home, study at home. This may extend beyond the mandated period. People will be shying away from going out. They would want things that they bought before to be affordable, high value for money, as you can see, because they are trying to be frugal. And back to basics, essentials. Okay. Now, don't be disappointed if you're in the luxury goods business, because when you pivot, you can reposition these products as essentials. This is a very interesting pivot. Remember not really remember, but if you read history, after World War II, entertainment became an essential because people were desperate. It was a very grim environment. So they're longing for entertainment, movies. So what used to be luxury became essential. Same with cigarettes, smoking. Became essential because people want to forget about their problem. Okay, so there are 3 specific lifetime changes that will make us rethink how we do business. So let me give you 3. There are many, but 3 most familiar ones, and let's see the implication on specific businesses. The first one is long distance relationship, video conferencing like this one. Okay, you talk to people through the screen. And second one is we're wearing masks inside, outside when we go out. Okay, and thirdly is social distancing. The 2-meter distance. Well, it looks harmless to you. Huh? It looks like a safety issue, but there are many business implications to these kinds of lifetime changes that will extend beyond the lockdown and perhaps the pandemic. The first one is what's below the belt or below the desk. You don't see it. You don't see it. So look at the business implication. Okay. All businesses selling stuff below the belt will have a problem. Like you're selling belts, selling shoes, pedicure, pants, right? Anything. You have to reinvent yourself. How do you make yourself more visible, more relevant? Okay. What about mask? Yeah, you only see half of the face. So if you're in the business of selling lipstick, or any jewelry in your mouth or in that part of your face, you will have a problem unless you pivot again to something more useful. Okay, So if you're very entrepreneurial, you can think of something like this. Why not humanize the mask so that you can see the face again? Something like that. This is a pivot of a mass producer from something medical to something more functional. Or if you want to level up, it could be a fashion statement. Okay, look at that, color coordinated. And even gloves can be a new fashion statement. You can still shake hands, but you have to wear gloves. But this is an opportunity. If you're just selling gloves, you might want to make it a fashion statement. Okay, the other interesting lifestyle change is distancing. People think this is just a safety issue, but this is an implication on most businesses. Okay, if you're 2 meters away from somebody, look at the implication. Okay, from the point of view of this girl, look at this. Can she really see if that's a Nike shoe? Is that a $200 shoe? Or is that from Payless? That's worth $20. Or is that a $1,000 Italian shoe? So it becomes irrelevant. There's no visibility anymore. What about her earring? How many carats? This guy wouldn't see. It's too far. So it's not visibility. Even the sense of smell. Can she smell her perfume? What about his deodorant? Breath fresheners. They become too. You cannot perceive this anymore at that distance. So if you're in these kinds of products, you have to reinvent yourself. How do you make yourself relevant when people are walking and talking from this kind of distance? Okay, let's move on. So let's look at the second type of vulnerability. So these are the first type. So the second type, which may require pivoting, will be those transport and travel related, obviously, because people don't want to move out. So how do you reinvent yourself if you're in this business? I'll share some examples of this kind of pivot. Businesses are dependent on high foot traffic, obviously, because people don't want to go out, dine out. So if you're in retail, you're in malls. So how do you reinvent yourself with less foot traffic? High contact, high touch. Right? You're in a spa, barber shop, manicure, a lot of touching, a lot of contact. So you have to pivot. Okay, not necessarily divest, but reinvent the product. The product has poor transparency. They cannot see what you're doing. For example, you're in a restaurant. They cannot see the kitchen. So people want to be assured that you're preparing the food properly. So you have to reinvent your kitchens so it can be seen by the customers. So this is only one. Or let's say you're making canned goods and all you have there are ingredients, but there's no tracing where it came from. So people want to see where your products or your ingredients came from, not just the content, but the origin, which country, which region. Second challenge business in this type would be those doing mass servicing and big batch processing, like movies, rock festival, sports. So these businesses will be challenged because of not only distancing, because it's crowd. Okay, so how do you reinvent yourself? Or airlines, mass transit. Okay, how do you invest mass transit because of mass servicing? And as I mentioned, those dealing with non-essentials, like the pre-pandemic luxury goods, how do you remarket them as essentials in the post-pandemic? So you have to pivot. You have to pivot. Okay. So crisis innovation is about looking at opportunities in problems or converting problems to opportunities, or pain points to profits, if you will. How do you convert pain points to profits? Okay. So new fears, we will have new fears, new pain points, new expectations, and new needs. So how do you exploit this? How do you pivot so that you can serve new markets, new customers with new products and new services? So this is the strategy. This is a strategy. Look at opportunities behind these problems. Okay. So let me just enumerate some of these crisis coping strategies that we see all around us. You can see this on TV. Most of these are really financial and economic in nature, because a lot of analysts see this as just an economic crisis. A lot of these coping strategies has to do with financial restructuring, waiving of interest, waiving of payments, more loans, right sizing, downsizing, streamlining, divestment, getting out of that business, and of course, consolidation. Okay. Well, this may work. This may save some or many companies if you think your businesses are still relevant and you're just having a financial issue brought about by this crisis. Okay. Well, the difficulty with these approaches is that there's no change in value proposition, business model, and customer experience. So once behavior changes, then these solutions won't work. You may get the cash, but you won't get your customers back. So we have to do another strategy of coping. We call it the business pivot, which will address the social crisis. And I think many businesses are not just financially challenged. Even their business models are being challenged. And financial solutions will not fix that problem. We have to look at things differently. We have to use our imagination. We have to use a different approach, a very non-financial approach. We call it innovation, using pivot approach. So when is the time to pivot? Okay? Just to summarize. Well, after fixing your financial and working and begging hard, okay, you realize that you're in a business without any business. So it's not a cash problem. You don't have customers, even though you have employees and good financial position. And you realize that the game has changed and you're in the wrong business, selling to the wrong people, the wrong things at the wrong price. Okay, the government cannot help you on this. Nobody can help you. You have to help yourself. You have to think differently, outside the box, so to speak. Okay. So let me go to certain definition. Well, from the dictionary, to pivot is to turn or to rotate like a hinge. So let's translate that to business terms. And how do we translate this into a survival strategy? So it's like sending a satellite to deep space. It doesn't have enough fuel, though it has solar panels, but it can go outside our solar system. How? It pivots. It uses the gravity of the planets and the moon. Okay, goes around the planet, then it uses that, then escapes. So this is called pivoting. You get the energy of what you have. In other words, to get out of the solar system, you use the energy of the solar system. Use it as your jumping point, like a lever to catapult you to higher levels. Okay, it's like getting out of the box, but you need a box to jump from. Okay, you still use the box to get out of the box, so to speak. I will explain this a little bit more. Or if you're musically inclined, you know, people enjoy jazz, but people say, oh, it's good music, but I don't understand it. Well, that's basically the idea. Okay, the rule of jazz is just two. First is know the rules of music. Then you start breaking it. We call it improvisation. Then you get good music because people are breaking the rules. But you have to learn the rules first. So this is called pivot. Let's go to the more serious stuff. I'm now getting into my key topic on how do you pivot in business terms. Instead of giving you a sentence, I'm going to ask a question. So the question will define what this term is. First is identify your strengths, current strengths, your competency. Now I put a parenthesis here, core and non-core. Why is this important? Normally in a traditional strategic analysis, you look at your core competence. But in this crisis situation, you look at your non-core. Why is this important? Maybe your core becomes irrelevant. Maybe the non-core becomes more relevant. So look at your inventory of strengths, both core and non-core. This is very important in pivoting because this may save you the non-core competency that's just in the drawer. Suddenly it becomes very important. It will save your company. Okay, so that's the first thing, inventory of strengths. Where are we strong? Okay, where do you find this? You find this in the 8 Ps. What are my strengths and competency in my product, process, plant, people, property, position, platform, partners? Okay. Look at all these parts of your business model. You may have strength not only in product, but in people, in your supply chain, in your technology, in your property, in your land, your assets. Where are these? Okay. So why are we looking at these things? Well, you want to make money out of that. You want to monetize to save your company. So how do you monetize? You productize, you repurpose, you extend, and you leverage. Just like that satellite example I gave you. You leverage, you repurpose. I'll give examples of this later on. What for? Why are you doing this? Well, exactly to serve the new normal, which has new needs and new markets. This is the ultimate end game. That's the bottom line. How do you serve this? Using your current strengths in a more innovative way. Now, it's not just finding strength. You have to convert it to something useful. You have to deliver a compelling value proposition. It's not going to be more of the same. It has to be different, compelling value for money. It has to deliver dramatic improvement in price, cost, or time. Or it can give the customer a very game-changing experience. And that's pivot that will save the company. Not just looking at your strength. It has to deliver this to these new markets, the post-pandemic market. Okay, so that should give you more detailed description of what pivot is. So in the old traditional R&D process of innovation, you always start from scratch. Like you're a new startup, you have nothing, okay? So you start with a lot of trial and error to deliver this. But in pivot, you always start with a base. You're coming from a base. You have already something, your existing business, that you will reinvent and you will abandon later on. You invent and then you abandon. That's what we call pivot design. What's the advantage of designing using the pivot strategy? Well, let's talk about learning curve or ramp up speed. How do you speed up your capacity so that you become viable right away? Okay. So the shape is S. It's the same whether it's ramp up speed or learning curve. If this is the conventional business transformation, this may take a while. And you'll run out of money, you'll run out of markets, somebody will be ahead of you. This normally takes years. Okay? In fast fashion, they make this shorter because fashion is so perishable. Okay? It's similar to fast fashion. How do you reinvent yourself fast? So in pivot, you want to shorten the attainment of that goal. Okay? You learn faster, you ramp up faster because you're using existing knowledge, existing strength in a different way. So this is your advantage over those who are not pivoting, they're just reinventing themselves randomly or in a panic mode. Okay? So let me summarize the advantages of this strategy. One is with pivot, you can have a short learning curve. You can develop products faster. You can be in the shelf faster. We call it time to market. And most importantly, you need less investment and less manpower, less capex, which is good in a crisis because you don't have money. Okay, so it becomes a win-win strategy. Let me go back to the origin of pivot, not to the dictionary, but this way of thinking. that there are no rules. This became popular because of a design philosophy called Lean Startup. Okay, this came from the Lean thinking. Okay, in other words, you don't invent, you don't prototype a complete product. They call it MVP, a minimum viable product. It's a very rough product that you throw to the market. Okay, and then the market will respond. You don't have any fixed idea on how the product will be used and who will be the user. Of course, there will be initial values like, oh, this is our first use, first market. But once you try to the product, you do iteration, you do a lot of testing, you learn. And then as it evolves, the customer will react and they'll actually fine tune the product for you or probably misuse it, misuse the product. And that will be the correct use, the way they use it, the way they misuse it. And then the market segment suddenly changes. So you pivot to that market segment. It's not the original market, target market. It may change. So you're very flexible. You don't have any fixed idea on okay. You're very open to this. So that's pivot. This is used for design, So and it doesn't matter who's the final customer as long as it works, it becomes viable, it's saleable. Now, before Lean Startup, there are historical, body of knowledge that precedes this. This is what I call the inductive method, in which you don't test theory compared to the deductive. You develop theories as you move along. So it's very like inductive. Yeah? You harvest data, let the data develop the theories. And of course, there's a branch of philosophy called empiricism, in which all knowledge, that assumes all knowledge and learning, comes from experience and observation, not some theory. Okay, and more currently, it's used in data analytics and data science. That is no hypothesis. It looks at patterns, trends, explore the data, and let the data come out with a hypothesis. Data science is not particular about cause and effect. They just say, they look at patterns and they monetize this, they productize it, and solve social problems like traffic and disease. Okay, so these are all related to pivoting. These are all related. It helps in our way of thinking, yeah? That there are no rules. The only rule is what works, what the customer wants. That's the only rule. So as a strategy, there are three uses of pivoting. One is design, as I mentioned. Growth. If you want to be more competitive, you level up, you move to new product lines. And of course, survival, which is our topic for today. Okay? You use it for survival. So pivot practices will be, how do you reimagine your business model? Think again. Be willing to break your business model. We used to write a business canvas. You tear up that business canvas and paint another one, something like that. Rethink your markets. Maybe it's a different market already. You reinvent your products. You re-engineer your process. You reskill, recast your people. Now, recast means, example, they used to be frontliners. Why not make them back end or back office? Or back office can become frontliners. Okay? Cost centers can become revenue centers, and revenue centers can become cost centers. But in this crisis, what you should look at are, most employees are really cost centers. Very few are really revenue generating. So the way to pivot is, how do you convert these cost-centered people to become revenue centers, sources of revenue? How do you productize the backroom people? Repurpose your assets. I will give you examples of this. How do you reuse them in a different way? Could be property, land, machine. And how do you look at your partners? Are suppliers always suppliers? Maybe they can act like salesmen or employees. Can employees become customers, etc., etc.? So redefine partnership. You pivot, you change the role. So some more pivot principles. The customer is the key to pivoting. It's not just a part of the pivot. It's the reason why you pivot. We pivot when the customers pivot. That's essentially it. You dance with the customers. If you don't dance with the customers, you'll be left behind. It must remove a pain point before it can add to profits. Remember, a pain point or a fear point in this crisis. It's not a promise. It's not a promise, but a consistently delivered promise. This takes some time. This really very serious business. Promising is easy, but to deliver it consistently, that's the tough part. That's the tough part. This is where you have to re-engineer your process. Okay? Think outside the box. Think left field using not your left brain, but your right brain. Process thinking is very important in this kind of thinking. Look at similarities in process among differences. This will be very useful, and we'll give examples of this later on. So how do you use your process competency in another way? Okay, in another industry. Okay, look at similarities across industries. Okay, don't do different things, but do things differently. That's what pivot is all about. It's not doing so many things. Don't reinvent the wheel, but use it for something else. Okay, let's go to examples before we go to some of those pandemic examples. This will give you an idea what pivoting really means. Okay. How and how not to pivot. Okay, if you look at these companies, I guess you're familiar with the brand, what made them great, their products. Okay. But would you believe that all of this, had they not pivot from their original business, would not be around? Because they started from very different business model, but very much related to what they're doing now. For example, Pepsi and Coke were invented in drugstores. They were invented by pharmacists. They were medicine. Coke was used for headache cure, for nerve tonic. That's why, Coca-Cola, the meaning Coca-Cola, Coca means the original ingredient consists of coca leaves and cola nuts. Pepsi is for indigestion. That's why for dyspepsia is indigestion. That's where the word Pepsi came from. Okay? Then they pivot into refreshment and beverage. That's what made the company great. Okay? Imagine if they're still into healthcare, they won't be around. They probably won't succeed in healthcare. Starbucks, we're all familiar with the restaurant. They didn't start with restaurant. They were selling machines and coffee beans. They were a trader until Howard Schultz said, oh, no, let's pivot into restaurant business after visiting Italy. Okay. And the rest is history. They made more money on the restaurant than on the beans. P&G started with candles before they went into foods and personal care. Wrigley is the most, to me, interesting pivot. William Wrigley, the founder, used to be a direct salesman. He was selling baking soda and soap. But he was giving away free gums as incentive to buy the soap. But the customer said, we want your gum. We don't like your soap. They like the gum. So Wrigley said, okay, let me pivot. I stopped selling soap. They start making and selling gums, and the rest is history. So Wrigley became the most famous gum company in the world. Western Union used to be a telegraph. Of course, we always associate them with sending money, remittance. But what's the similarity? Well, sending messages, sending money are a very similar process. Okay, because money is just information, just like a message. Nikon was just making lens, so they pivot into making cameras. These two companies, 8 and 9, very interesting history. Bombardier is like Airbus and Boeing. They make planes, but they started on land, making snowmobile. Then they pivot into the air. But then BMW is the reverse. BMW wasn't making cars. They're making aircraft. Then down there, they became a land-based company making cars. So these are very nice pivot. They made them very successful. Rolls-Royce wasn't into luxury cars. They were making dynamos, electric trains, very, very uninteresting products until they pivot into luxury cars. Kia wasn't into cars. They were making bicycles. Okay? That was the original. And to me, the next interesting pivot after Wrigley is really Toyota. Would you believe Toyota didn't start from cars? They started in the textile industry. They're making textile spinning machine, automatic loom. Then they pivot into cars. Okay. And Toyota, of course, is the most famous manufacturing car company, if not, and a leader in the car industry. So look at this pivot. You might think, oh, how did they go to car? Isn't this diversification? Diversification is not pivot. This is not diversification. There's a lot of similarity. First, the loom is high precision machinery. They developed their competency in high precision, which they translated to car making. Now, if you're familiar with lean thinking, a lot of, especially my students, I teach them a lot of these best practices like Andon, Jidoka, idiot proofing, Pokayoke. All these things came from making the loom, the spinning, because this is idiot proof. There's a lot of Andon there. Okay, so they applied it to car making. So that's how they pivot. And the rest is history. By the way, for your information, Suzuki, that maker of motorcycle and car, also started with textile machinery, just like Toyota. And would you believe Toyota kept the original company? They still have a subsidiary making looms, even as of today. They call it Toyota Automatic Loom Works, just for nostalgia. Okay. I'm gonna show you several products, and let's see if you have the differences. So this is a PC. Look at the differences and similarity. This is Post-it. This is WD-40. That's Levi's jeans. That's the Philippine Jeepney. That's Southwest. That's Facebook. That's Play-Doh. And of course, that's Viagra. All familiar companies. You say, okay, what are these miscellaneous products? Well, what do we learn from this? Of course, if you look at it, these are all famous brands, multi-billion sales. But what do we learn from? These are all pivot products. They were not what they're supposed to be until somebody said, let's pivot this into something else. Let's start with the PC. Guess who said this? I think there's a world market for maybe 5 computers. The one who said it was the founder of IBM, Watson, because he was thinking of big computers. Of course, we're thinking of big computers like this. The market is very, very small at that time. Okay, until they pivot into PC, the IBM PC. Fortunately, they did not scale this. Okay, they didn't think that PC can be used in the home for games, for personal productivity. Okay, so who profited from this? Who exploited this? Of course, the likes of Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Intel, the Silicon Valley enterprise was built on the PC. Okay? So let's try to learn from this pivot, which based on repurposing of product features. So the PC was pivot from industrial use to games and personal productivity. That's why the growth became exponential. So the computer is now a friendly device. It's not in some research institution. Post-it was a mistake. Okay, it was a defective adhesive tape. Because it was defective, instead of throwing it out, it became a temporary marker and notepads, as we see it. So they pivoted. So the defect became the product. WD-40 was designed to be a lubricant, but consumers discovered a lot of uses like remover, softener, cleanser, some insecticide, you name it. So it's something you have to have at home. So if you stay at home, make sure you have WD-40. It solves a lot of household problems. So that's how they position the product, not just as a lubricant. Play-Doh was just a wallpaper cleaner. It's a very dull clay, dark, until somebody in school discovered it, that children wants to play with it. Then they colored it, and the rest is history. It became a children modeling clay. Of course, Viagra, when Pfizer developed this, it was meant for chest pain, for heart medicine, until they discovered the side effect for impotency. So now they sold the side effect for ED cure, and the rest is history. This product made billions for Pfizer, not with the original intent as a heart medicine. Jeepney, of course, after World War II, the GIs left a lot of these military jeeps in the country. So instead of scrapping them and trying, it was pivoted into public transport, which is now one of the major transport mass transport vehicle in Philippines. Southwest was positioned to steal market share from the big airlines using point-to-point travel, short haul. Then they realized that why don't we pivot it to long-distance motorists? So instead of stealing market share from the other airline, they created their own market share. They converted motorists into air-flying passengers. Levi's jeans, you know, if you have tattered jeans, you know, people are now wearing tattered jeans. There is some history to that because the original jeans were designed for miners and railroad workers. They're very sturdy. Then they pivot into selling it as a young casual wear, and the rest is history. The greatest pivot to me is Facebook. Facebook was originally a dating site, a school directory, using the Harvard computer and Mark Zuckerberg and the rest use it as a dating site. Then they pivoted into social networking. I think they were thrown out of Harvard because they were using this for non-academic purposes. And guess what? Facebook now is richer than Harvard and all universities combined in the US. Let me tell you 3 pivot stories of what to do, what not to do. I guess you're familiar with these 3 companies. Okay, Nokia, it's a very interesting story, how we came to know about this company, a known company in Finland. Started as a pulp mill. Then they have a little electronics department that's working on telecom infrastructure. Now, this is not pivot because these are totally unrelated. This is diversification. But this is their core. This is non-core. This is non-core to them. Then they said, okay, why don't we pivot the telecom small business into mobile telephony called cell phone? And the rest is history. Okay, they were the pioneer in cell phones. Okay, but the problem is they ended there. They did not pivot into something else. They just made better cell phones. And that's the end of Nokia. That's the end of Nokia. They're still around on doing telecom infrastructure, but they've lost this space. The Apple is an interesting pivot. Started with computers, then went to mobile devices, and then it went to smartphones. That's what saved Apple. And most of the sales of Apple depend on smartphones. Samsung has a different track, but it ended like Apple, a leader in smartphone. Started with a plan. By the way, this wasn't the start of Samsung. Samsung started in dried fish. Okay, but let's cut that history short. Let's say they're in appliances, then they move into mobile devices, and like Nokia, they went to cell phones, but they quickly changed to smartphone. So these pivots are very, very successful ones. And you know the leaders now are Apple and Samsung in this area. So how do you pivot a small business? So how do you extend core competency? Okay. A lot of you are wondering, how do we save the small business? Okay. Example, you're a pawn shop. Okay. And we see actual examples of this. Okay. How do you scale? More branches? No, more branches of pawn shop is not really gonna save you. They go to jewelry shop. Yeah, it sounds similar. I mean, different, but they you know, a lot of jewelry are foreclosed once the customer cannot pay. So they have to sell this. So they have to develop this competence of selling and assessing jewelry. And then they go to money remittance. Then you say, oh, what kind of pivot is that? How is that related? Okay, they're very related. These 3 diverse industries are very related. So what's the common theme? What are they leveraging here? Okay, if you look at the pawn shop, the core competencies will be cash management. They know how to handle cash because everything is cash-based. So this is cash. They know how to handle security. They know how to handle privacy of customers. And most importantly, they're in very convenient location. Okay. So if you pivot into these industries, you will be very successful. And it's very easy to move from this business to another business with very little investment, very little in upfront cost. What about a career? Okay, let me show you a career. This is one of my interesting, I only share this in class. Can you pivot a career? Okay, career change. We call it career change. But career change can be a failure, can be a success. So let me show you an example of a career pivot. Okay, yeah, let's say you know how to sing, and then you get tired of singing. So what do? You become an actor. Okay, many careers are like this: singer becoming actor, or even dancers like Fred Astaire becoming an actor. Okay, you get tired of actor. What do you want to be? What do you pivot to? Okay, you can be a politician, maybe a world leader. Okay, so very easy career. And many actors become politicians and world leaders. So why is this so possible? So diverse, so diverse. Actually, they're not diverse. They're similar. What are their common competency? First is they know how to emote. They know empathy. Okay? They know empathy. So if you know how to sing, you know how to act, you can be a politician. They know stage presence, they know projection. All these three careers use this a lot. They know how to speak, they know how to present. Okay? They're very media friendly, and they have good memories. Good memory. You need this when you're a singer, an actor, a politician. Good memory. Okay. Okay. Warning. It cannot go the reverse. Huh? Okay. I don't think politician can pivot to be an actor becoming a singer. Okay. That could be a disaster. That could be a disaster. Huh? Should be to be this way, not this way. Okay, in the UK, according to the news, a lot of businesses are down. They have no work. So a lot of chefs, engineers, and went to the farm. They became farmers, and it made them earn some more, and they realize, well, they can become farmers. So these are interesting pivot. These are interesting. It can be short term, it can be long term. It can be long term. Okay, let's go to some examples, short-term pivot. I'm gonna rush through this because these are easy pivots in the pandemic lockdown period. Okay, then we're gonna talk about post-pandemic, long-term examples. So wartime industries. How do you pivot into the vital wartime? Wartime is very simple. What are allowed during the lockdown period? Okay, these are doing medical supplies, equipment, facilities, relief goods, foods, logistics. Okay, you're allowed. So you can still earn, make money. So you can see several examples of this, like apparel makers can make masks, PPEs. That's a very easy pivot. If you're in textile garment, if you're in real estate, you can convert it to quarantine areas, to field hospitals or testing facilities. Food and restaurant, you can make disaster foods. You can make foods for those in the frontliners. If you're in packaging, you can package relief goods, supplies like alcohol, sanitizers. This is an easy pivot, but this is gonna be temporary during the pandemic, not in the post-pandemic. Maintenance, instead of fixing luxury cars, you can fix ambulances, military and police vehicles. And your logistics, you can carry medicine, food, and other essential goods instead of carrying non-essentials. You're in communication, you can become an emergency hotline, help desk, disaster response centers, etc. And if you're in printing, you can print signages for hospitals, security areas, leaflets, etc. So these are very easy, but these are very temporary. These are very temporary. So let me show you another example of pivot. Lego, Bauer, a helmet maker, Malaysia's BG, BGB, Social Network, and Kimpo, Taiwanese electronics company. And a very interesting Kasoko tour operator, which I will discuss. Okay, so these are during pivot, during pandemics, not post-pandemic. So Lego can reset their machine, convert their machine. Instead of molding toys, they can mold medical facials. Similar to Bauer, who molds helmets, they can mold medical facial. This social enterprise has a lot of network, designers, communities, textile makers. So they combine this stakeholders to produce PPEs and face shields. Even the designer was part of their social network. Kimpo, I think it's very easy. From electronic, they can make hospital ventilators. The most interesting pivot here is Kasoko, a tour operator that you know, travel and tour are down. Nobody wants to travel, nobody wants to book an hotel. So the owner of this Kasoko said, okay, there are many empty hotels in Japan. How do I pivot this? How do I resell this into something else? So I noticed that a lot of male Japanese or husbands have to stay at home with their family. And this is very unusual in Japan. Because normally you don't go home that early, or you don't stay with your family for such a long time. So there's a lot of tension. You know, in other countries, this becomes domestic violence. In Japan, it's called divorce. They divorce. They call it Corona divorce. So what this guy said, okay, let me help that. He offered vacation rentals for stressed couples. Now, don't get me wrong. This is not a room for the couple. This is a room for one person to separate them. Okay? Give them space so they don't stay in the same place at the same time for a long time. So he was selling this. It was very popular. So instead of the husband going home, he goes to this hotel room to spend time to save the marriage. Okay, it's a cure for Corona divorce. A very interesting pivot. Okay, repurposing idle assets. This is not just for businesses. This can be for local government. You know, Georgia and Florida were the first to reopen in the U.S. So in Florida, in Tampa Bay, I think the mayor allowed the restaurants to use the streets for their operation, so they can operate with social distancing. So the restaurant became viable because without the streets, just stay in the hospital in their facility. They can only operate 25% capacity given that two distance. Now with open street operation, they can increase utilization to 80%. So they became viable thanks to this repurposing of idle assets of the city. So in the post-pandemic industry, post-pandemic pivot, so you may want to consider new value proposition. So tourism is down. So from mass tourism, you can pivot to slow, sustainable tourism. From backpack tourism, you can pivot to bucket list, more value-adding tourism. From sightseeing, you can go to wellness and medical tourism. In other words, pivot from low margin, low value, high volume to high margin, high value, low volume. But there's a catch. You cannot increase the price that much because customers are after affordability. So the question now is, how do you deliver this at affordable price with low cost operation? That's the challenge. You have to re-engineer. So you offer high value at affordable price, but very different from the pre-pandemic experience. Okay, repurposing of assets and processes. I'm getting close to my end. So let's say you're in the hotel and service apartments and it's empty. I gave you the Kasoko example earlier. So why not translate it into fitness centers, because it's the same facility. If you're in schools, university, maybe part of your facility can be converted to training, health research and training centers of excellence. Let's say in the near term or long term, banks will be in trouble, insurance. So how do you reinvent yourself? If you look at processes, they can easily become non-voice BPO because they use the same process, information processing. So this is thinking out of the box, okay? So consider this in your industry. How can you repurpose assets and your processes into another more relevant, more viable industry? Okay, delivery, I guess. So it's not just the product that you pivot. It could be the mode of delivery. We've seen these examples. You can pivot into takeout, curbside, home delivery, pickup, cashless, changeless, on demand. You can do JIT replenishment. You can do VMI delivery. So these are experimentation in the way you deliver the same thing. In other words, it's the same thing but done differently. You can apply it to pricing and payment. Instead of collecting on demand, why don't you just sell a pre-need pricing? In other words, it's like fly now, pay later, or pay now, fly later, something like that. Then you can use it anytime post-pandemic. There's indefinite validity. It can be on demand, no reservation, no cancellation fee. It's cashable, returnable, and easy installment. So you can innovate the pricing and payment. Okay, you can still get the cash. You don't have to operate. Then the customer gets a deal with good discount, low pricing. So be careful about what seems to be pivot. And these are not always pivot. When you enhance the product, you just make it over. There's no change in value proposition. That's not a pivot. When you add new models, that's not a pivot. When you diversify, not necessarily. And when you do M&A, not necessarily. And when you forward, the backward, lateral integrate, not necessarily pivot. Let's say when you take over your dealer, take over your supplier, or take over your competitor, that's not always a successful pivot. And most importantly, going online. Is going online a pivot? Yes and no. Most likely no, because this is now just a trend. Sending your business to the cloud doesn't mean you have saved your business, not necessarily. When you transform to digital, that doesn't mean that you will survive. So there are risks in going online unless you're careful. Okay. So what are these risks? What are these common failure points of going online just to so-called pivot? Which is not. First of all, there's no differentiation. I call it the app fatigue. Everybody sending app. There's no differentiation. Okay. Secondly, it's not sustainable. Sooner or later, we'll have an app bubble just like the internet bubble. Okay. There's no end-to-end thorough. There's no thorough design of the end-to-end. It's still riddled with a lot of customer pain points. Okay. You have a very high-tech front end, but very primitive back end. So again, failure. You cannot deliver the value. There's no commitment to service. It's not repeatable. It's not scalable. Okay? So digitizing doesn't mean it will be scalable, repeatable. And most importantly, you just digitize and automate the same value proposition. So if the value proposition remains the same, going online is not going to be a pivot. You won't get the customers back just because you have a nice website or a nice app in the cell phone. So let me conclude by this slide on I think most of you are into SMEs, and this is the most challenge of all sectors, unfortunately. It's the most number of employees in any country. It gives employment to the most number, and majority of firms are in this category, and they're all suffering. They need financial help, but there's hope. There's hope if you use the pivot strategy. Why is there hope? Well, the smaller the better. I see personally that SMEs have more flexibilities and opportunities to pivot than larger firms. Why is that so? Don't envy the large firms. They have problems of their own. They cannot easily pivot. They're like aircraft carriers that cannot change or Titanic, compared to SMEs, which are like speedboats or yachts that can turn or pivot. First, what are the disadvantages of being large? Well, if you're a listed large firm, you're subject to governance, due diligence, regulatory report. You cannot just pivot to any business. You'll be controlled by these constraints, especially by the SEC. You cannot just change business model overnight. If you're highly leveraged, and most large firms are highly leveraged, you're controlled by your creditors. You have to get the permission of creditors before you change your business model, okay? Before you divest. Why? Because most of your assets will be mortgaged to these guys, to your banks. You cannot just write off inventory, plant, equipment because you're changing business model. Because you don't own them technically. It's owned by your creditors. Okay? So it's very hard to switch value proposition if all these stakeholders are watching you. If you have high overhead, high fixed cost, your break even is high, you cannot cater to small customers because will have high MOQ. Silo thinking, autonomous business units, it's very hard because the business unit head will protect his turf. Let's say a business unit in a large firm has become irrelevant. The head of that unit will defend that business even though it's going down. Now, if you're an entrepreneur, a small entrepreneur, you don't have problem in giving up some products because there's no business unit head there. You're the head. Okay? A lot of silo thinking, a lot of turf protecting the business, even though it's no longer relevant in the new normal. And lastly, you have most large firms have huge workforce, as I mentioned. It's very hard to right size and reskill this huge workforce compared to smaller firms. Okay, it's almost 1:15. So let me conclude where I started off, asking the right question. So what can you ask yourself? What can you ask yourself? Example of right or wrong question. Wrong question. How can I convince my customer to buy? That's the wrong question. Otherwise, you'll throw marketing budgets into this. The right question is he still the same customer? Has he changed? What are his new expectations? That's the right question. Spend time on this rather than more marketing, more advertising, more promotion of the same thing. Another wrong question, how can I improve my business? Okay, don't waste your time improving the business. Spend time asking this right question. Am I still in the right business? What business am I really in? What else can I offer differently? That's the right question. Another wrong question, very wrong question. How do we get money to survive this crisis? Okay, a lot of leaders are spending time on this. Where to get the money? Where to beg? Maybe you can get the money, but you won't survive. Because the right question is, how do you make money out of this crisis? That's the better question. Spend time on this. Spend time on this. Okay, so thank you. So let me share with you. By the way, last word from me. So in this crisis, the worst failure is the failure of imagination. So pivoting is about imagination. So failure of imagination. In other words, imagination is what will save you, not money, not technology, not science, imagination. So let me invite you to my social media. You can, log into Facebook and LinkedIn and see my other posts. I call it my pandemic post. And I use the same hashtag RTD COVID-19, and you can see all my posts. A lot of the ideas I shared here, you can see in my post in these two sites. I do have my website if you want to see my old classic articles on management, lean, and TQM, rtdonline.com. Of course, that's my email. Okay, so I hope I shared something that will be useful. Pivot is not a guarantee, but it may increase your chances of survival and success. Okay, thank you very much. So let's see if we have questions. Carl, Alexi.
Okay. We have a question from Mr. Kai Kuasai.
Yes,
He
please.
asks, how do you check for your pivot's long-term viability versus band-aid solutions? How important is it to be brand faithful about your business decisions during these times?
Well, pivot is never long-term or short-term. It's never short-term. It's always long-term. That's why you have to study hard the market behavior. If the market behavior is short-term, the pivot there is not actually pivot. It's a temporary pivot. It's like Lego doing face masks. That's not the pivot. That's very short-term. I don't think Lego will start making medical devices after this. Okay. Their pivot is like Toyota from textile becoming automobile. That's permanent. That's permanent. So the answer to that question is, how thorough did you study the market? Is the market behavior permanent? Then you pivot towards that behavior. Then your pivot becomes permanent. It becomes sustainable and money-making. Okay. Now regarding brand is just a name. Okay. You can develop new brands, new products under that brand. No problem. No problem. Okay. But don't tie the product to the brand. The brand serves a need. Okay. People become faithful to the brand, not to the product. Okay? So learn to give up the product. Give up the product. You don't have to give up the brand. Toyota was selling a lot of anything sold under Toyota should sell. Right? They don't mind. Even if the hybrid car sells. Okay. Next question, Alexi.
This is from Mr. Abe Gaspar. Can a pivot strategy be used to intentionally change the ways customers behave, relate, or even demand from companies such as product or service providers?
There's no such thing as changing behavior. You know, when Apple invents the smartphone, Steve Jobs was reeling the minds of the customers. He was not changing the behavior. So to be able to see the unstated needs of the client is what's important, your imagination. Okay? Surely it looks like changing their behavior. It actually, you anticipated their behavior. That's why you feel that you change it. No, it's actually anticipating what will be there. You'll be 2 steps ahead of the curve, 2 steps ahead of your clients. Okay. Then you can actually lead them to what they want. It's actually what they want. You cannot force them to change behavior. Smartphone, we want smartphone, except that it wasn't invented yet. We want the convenience of a smartphone. Okay? That wasn't forced into us. We really wanted that if it existed. Yes, next.
If you were to provide affordability like flexible and longer payment terms for B2B transaction, you are at the same time increasing AR. How do you balance and manage risks? This is from Mr. Joseph Marcelo.
Well, it you know, there's no such thing as high cost or high financing cost. It's all ROI, right? It's all ROI. You get the working capital to get a return on that. Okay, give them longer AR. You borrow money. You get high value proposition. Your margin is high, right? Now, low price doesn't mean low margin. That's why you have to re-engineer your cost also, right? Okay, you're not sacrificing profit here. Okay, you're making it affordable and profitable, financially and operationally. That's the meaning of business. Okay, so you borrow low and sell high. That's how you fund this. Okay? Okay, that's how you fund your AR because the AR makes money for you. Yes.
Okay, we have another.
Yes, please.
This is from Mr. Jade Andamanresho. Aside from going online, how do you pivot from conventional educational institution?
Well, this remains to be seen because we're under regulation like CHED, DepEd. That will be our constraint. It's like another social distancing protocol, with IATF and DOH combined. So again, it's the value proposition. You work backwards. People want to learn. So technology, whether it's face-to-face or online or whatever, chairs, these are all technology. These are just delivery system, textbooks, tablets. Look at this as delivery systems. So the end point is did the students learn? If they can learn in some other way under the tree, right, on bicycle, doesn't really matter. So the answer to that question is, again, imagination. How can people learn? Should we learn together or by ourselves? So it's very hard to answer, but you have to do research. What is the best mode for learning specific things? Maybe depending on the school, depending on the subject, the delivery system will have to adjust. There is no shotgun approach to this. Sometimes face-to-face is better, sometimes online is better. Doesn't really matter. It depends on how flexible you are. You make money on face-to-face, you make money on online, and you lose money on both. If you have if you mismatch that needs with the delivery system. Yes, any next question?
We have a question here from the public relations and event management industry. She asked, how do you pivot a small business that is considered a non-essential, like public relations? For event management, what other products aside from online hosted events?
That's very specific question. So, let me answer that question with a question. Well, I did mention already. Can you remarket that so-called luxury product into essential? Public relation is not a luxury. It could be essential. It's the way you position it. Right? So when you pivot, you pivot also the marketing message, not just the delivery, not just the product. Okay, PR is very important. In fact, what you see on TV today is all PR. What you see on TV is all PR. That's PR. How you talk, how you send messages. Right? Unfortunately, they're not in that boat. Right? They're leaving it to anyone. Okay, so it's a question of as I mentioned, a luxury can become essential if you pivot it as such. Even smoking, even movies, even whatever can be pivoted, remarketed as an essential service in the post-pandemic new normal. Any more, Alexi?
That's about it, Prof. Rene. Most of the questions here have been answered in your presentation. Thank you, Prof.
Okay, so thank you very much again. I hope you learned something. Carl, would you like to end the program?
Yes, so thank you very much, Prof. Rene, no, for being with us today and sharing your, the products of your research and insights about how different businesses must actually change, no? And well, change, di ba? That's more sure than death, I guess. No, it's as sure as death. So, in other words, if you don't change, well, you could literally
It's like taxes.
yeah, it's like taxes, no? So to survive, we really need to change. And sometimes, if you're looking at your business as non-essential, maybe you have to have a fresh look and see it from different lens. That who says it's non-essential? No, then maybe the question is who would find this essential now? No, who would need it? And you might discover that you actually have an underserved or untapped market for that. No, I mean, like Prof. Rene said, it's really all about imagination, no, imagination and creativity, and then really looking for ways to change and pivot to reinvent yourselves. So with that, I think Rene, thank you again, and everyone, thank you for joining us here today. We hope that some of these ideas will help you seriously think through your own business models. Thank you, and have a good day.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.